Welcome to channel. Today, we explore story filled with unexpected twists. Please, subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin. I assumed this was it for me. I had lived hard, and my life had been as difficult. Perhaps I had exhausted my luck and should have left this world 7 months ago. I was a cowhand and gunslinger who was once recruited to defend a gang of scrappy cattlemen in the north. They were fine people, but they had little hope against the large group driving them off their property. When the guy who hired me was murdered, the others just disintegrated at the final duel on that dusty street where he had fallen. I was sleeping next to him. He was dead. I wasn't, but I wasn't really alive either. I had taken a few bullets. One had grazed my ribs and broken them, while another was embedded deep in my thigh. The ranchers I worked for were too terrified to approach me or their deceased employer. I lay there for 2 hours till darkness came, and I was able to pull myself to my horse. A boy assisted me onto the saddle, and scarcely awake, I led the horse out of town. I was 4 days into what was supposed to be a 3-day excursion when calamity struck. My horse stepped into a gopher hole and fractured its leg. I had barely gotten to the rear of a water hole when it occurred. I had to lay the poor animal down and crawl the last 100 yards to the sheltering rocks, sick and alone. I was miles from aid. My leg was infected, and each breath brought waves of anguish from my fractured ribs. I would have gone to my brother's spread if not for this. I was going off the usual route, with no trails in sight. It may be days before someone finds me. I got a drink and dragged myself back into the rock's shade before passing off. I got up when I heard voices. Unbelieving, one of them was my brother Thomas' voice. God, how could I be so fortunate? Perhaps my luck wasn't completely gone after all. I stood forward, ready to make my presence known, when a gunshot rang out and my brother collapsed. Reflexes took control, and I drew my piece, ignoring the 2 guys hovering over my brother. They intended to insert a few more slugs into their victim, but they perished before they could. I crept out to see how seriously my brother had been hit. It was horrible. Thomas had been struck in the chest and was dying. He and I both knew it, yet he still had enough vitality to recognize me. Jonathan. Jonathan, this can't be. Oh, God, I am pleased to see you. You need to do something for me. Pay close attention. My saddlebags are loaded with cash. I'm returning home after a trail drive. The guys that shot me work for a man called Leonard White. The majority of the money is his, yet he may be more concerned with something else. He wants my wife, Rachel. He has boasted that eventually he will have her. Thomas passed out, and I wasn't sure whether he'd wake up. I crept over to his bedroll and located his kit. When I opened it up, a bottle of horse liniment dropped out. I figured that may save my life. Just then, the coffee pot boiled over, and I estimated that my brother had time to set up camp before being shot, and I was completely oblivious of this. Thomas had no idea how horrible things were for me, since when he woke up, he assumed I was going to saddle horse and ride away to rescue his wife. I stated I would remain for a while. We looked back on our life. It had been a year since I saw him. He got married and acquired a little spread. We had maintained in contact by him placing me as care of general delivery in different locations where he knew I would be. He informed me that, just as he was leaving with the herd, Rachel said that she suspected she could be pregnant. He had nearly remained at home, but they needed to sell some of the steers that had finally reached the appropriate age. Leonard White had persuaded him to drive his much bigger herd alongside his own, and he would pay him more if he placed the cattle in the same herd. He had agreed since money was usually in limited supply. Thomas could see what was going on. Now that Thomas was gone, Vincent would be free to pursue Rachel. We reminisced about our upbringing and chuckled at my constant fights about my name, Jonathan. Even Mom acknowledged it was a mistake to call me that. Thomas was a year older than me and larger. I was smaller, just around 510, but faster. None of us regretted our lives. I'd gone everywhere and done whatever struck my fancy. Thomas' main regret was that he died without seeing Rachel or the kid, assuming there was one. Thomas' final words were, "Take care of her." The next time I glanced at him, he was gone. I set about taking care of myself. I had a mission, if you can call it that. My gun would eventually find the guy who had ordered my brother's killing. Looking at my leg, I finally done it. I grabbed my knife and severed the bullet's path from back to front, then extracted the bullet from under the flesh slightly above the knee. I had a gash that was about 10 inches long. The suppuration had destroyed a lot of the emotion, else I wouldn't have been able to accomplish this. I poured the liniment into the wound and the agony knocked me unconscious again. Coming to, I prepared a paste from the now cold coffee grounds, wrapped it in my shirt, and soaked it all in liniment. I tied it over the wound using pigskin threads from one of the saddles. I bid farewell to my brother. I left him exactly the way he had died. I examined the weaponry and staged a realistic gunfight. I didn't have the strength to bury Thomas or get him onto one of the other horses. I almost passed out from the agony of the crushed ribs as I pushed myself onto Thomas Brock. I sat on the horse and glanced around to see what I was leaving behind. I walked over, bent down, and untied the other horses, freeing them. Leonard White would eventually come hunting for his guys. I wanted it to seem like Thomas murdered them and then died from a gunshot he got in retaliation. The killer's horses went toward their home range, and I let Thomas' horse drift beside them for a while. A lot of this wasn't planned. I was in and out of consciousness for what seemed like miles. The other two horses followed in the footsteps they had left going north. The moon was up, and I felt renewed. I knew I needed to drive west toward Thomas' property, since the Black Oak Ranch was virtually straight south. Wide awake, I slowly moved my horse to the right, closer to the slopes that descended from a little butte. The other two horses followed for approximately 100 yards before turning back to the northbound rails and returning south toward home. Just as the dawn was rising, I drove into the yard of a tiny, clean ranch home. I called Rachel, as loudly as I could. A lady looked out from behind the open door. "Who are you? What are you doing with Thomas' horse? Where is Thomas?" She was clutching a gun, which moved up to cover me as she talked. I spoke quickly. "Ma'am, Thomas has died. Am nearly dead, and some people will be hunting for the money he had with him, which I have with me. You must conceal me since I killed those who murdered Thomas. Thomas' brother, Jonathan." I'll give the lady credit. She went straight to it. She led the horse into the barn, which was about 5 times the size of the home, and eased me off the horse. I collapsed to the floor, realizing how seriously I was hurt. She wanted to stop and pay me some attention, but I answered, "No, there isn't time. Drive the horse into the corral among the others, then drive the whole group out into the range. Go east across the tracks I created coming in, leaving them a half-mile away. Leave the saddle on so no one knows the horse traveled this far. You'll need to walk back. Just pretend the corral bars came down this morning and you were hunting for the horses. Where can I hide?" Rachel approached the feed box and, dragging it forward, lifted 3 broad boards, indicating a 4-foot deep hole. There were a few stairs leading to the bottom. No one is aware that this exists. The only problem is that after I put the grain box back, you won't be able to go out on your own. That is all right. If I die down here, I have part of Thomas' money with me. Get those horses going, please." I heard the surge of the remuda as it pounded through the yard. Rachel returned, I believe, perhaps an hour later. She sat above me and spoke through the floor. "Tell me about it. Is Thomas really dead?" "Yes, madam. I spent a little time with him. His last words were for you, and he conveyed his love. It meant to inquire whether you're pregnant. He said he would know, even when he was on the evil side. Another thing, don't believe Leonard White since he was the one who murdered him. He wanted the money, but most importantly, he wanted you. Eventually, I will get him. Yes, I do understand. Oh, I got a nasty feeling when Thomas departed. I've had a sinking sensation every day for the 6 weeks he's been gone. I could hear the lady above me wailing for her late husband and pregnant child. Won't you let me examine your wounds? What do you need to do first?" "I need water. I can hear some cooped-up hens. Can you bring a bucket of water to feed them? Simply open the floor long enough to hand it to me. If anybody sees you, they'll assume you're simply carrying water to the hens. Why would Vincent decide to come here so soon? He would have expected the killers to return around dark last night. So if they don't return on time, he'll seek for them. He will discover the horses and most likely come here. If he gets all the way to the waterhole first, he may not arrive before sunrise tomorrow. Otherwise, you may anticipate him at any moment." She gave me some water and a large chunk of steak between 2 slices of bread. Later, I overheard an interaction between one of the Black Riders and Rachel. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Is your husband still not at home?" "No, I anticipated him yesterday. I don't comprehend it. He wrote me a note 10 days ago, telling me when he would return home. I worry something has happened to him. Say, could you do me a favor? Could you please gather up my horses for me? They got out of the corral last night. Hank, the hired guy, will not return after his customary bender for another day or 2. I looked for the horses on foot but couldn't locate them anywhere. Gee, ma'am, I can't. I was only passing by, and Vincent will be unhappy. I took the time to speak. I'm really sorry. I heard him depart about 5 minutes later. Rachel entered the barn. Have you heard? Yes. I heard the rider was merely looking for Black. He did not wish to bring in the mass horse with the saddle. You were doing good. I'm not sure if I could have bluffed as you did knowing he was part of the team who murdered Thomas. I felt like yelling. Thomas is still laying out there alone, and I can't do anything about it. Look, maybe you could speed things up. Why don't you go speak to the sheriff and tell him you are worried? If someone sees the mass horse out there with a saddle on it, the sheriff will investigate. If you grain any of your horses, they will be hunting for bait around nightfall. Walk outside and make a call. Perhaps someone will approach you and offer you a lift into town. It's better than doing nothing. I slept, and then I heard some careful footsteps above my head. I heard the footfall ascending the stairs to the hayloft and could hear heavy rustling in the haymow above. Whoever was there was seeking for somewhere to hide or sleep. I suddenly heard Rachel talk to a horse as she led him onto the barn floor. I thought, damn, I hope she doesn't speak to me. Then, Hank, damn it, get out of the hayloft. This is the last time I will put up with you. Pack your duffel bag and get the heck out of here. You are fired. When I need you the most, you're out drinking. The Broncos escaped, and I had to hunt everywhere for them. Thomas will have to reimburse you when he returns home. Now get. I heard some muttering, followed by stillness. Rachel returned to the barn 20 minutes later, which seemed to take forever. I'm heading to town. I did not see the other horses in the corral, but the driving horse approached me. I am taking the buggy. You'll simply have to remain where you are for a bit longer. I believe Hank was still inebriated, so I dismissed him. I cannot have him with you here. You keep quiet now until I return. During the dead of night, Rachel brought me inside the home and served me soup as she examined my wounds. She applied some ointment to my ribs and wrapped me up with a clean, ripped flour bag. She revealed my leg and exclaimed in terror when she saw it. I was happy with it, however, since most of the rotten material had been removed. The pus from the coffee grinds had also removed most of the redness. Rachel's only option for making a poultice was to mash some cooked carrots. She said that this would keep the wound soft and moist, allowing healing by drawing more poison out. Rachel was not a very attractive woman, perhaps handsome. She clearly had her head on and was very competent. She was dressed loosely, and it wasn't obvious that she was pregnant. I felt terrible and worried what she was going to do next, so I inquired, keep running the ranch, I suppose. You mentioned you have the money Thomas received for our steers. That should keep me going for a long. You can't utilize it, however. How are you going to explain the whole pot of gold money? You are expected to be busted. She pondered about it all day. I'm going to write to my sister back home and ask if she has any suggestions. You said the money was secure. I suppose so, for the most part. When you go outdoors tomorrow, look east of that mound of rocks approximately 200 yards from the barn. I hoisted the saddlebags up on top. I was afraid it would kill me when I did it, but I didn't dare to bring them in with me. Good idea. I couldn't think of a better one. Nobody can climb up the rear high enough to see down, thus the saddlebag should be perfectly covered. Rachel placed me back in my hole before daylight. This time, I brought blankets, food, and drink. The pit was large enough to sit up in, with plenty of space to lay down, a very pleasant coffin to die in if I was stranded here. The sheriff and a deputy stopped by in the morning. Rachel requested him to get the horses for her. He wasn't gone long and returned to the yard in a hurry, behind Thomas' steed with the saddle still on. They discussed and inquired about Thomas' expected arrival direction. Soon, he was heading east. If the guy was any good, he'd quickly pick up the tracks and follow them back to the waterhole. What he would discover there would be debatable, assuming Leonard White had disposed of the dead. Rachel entered and spoke to me through the floor. What will I do with you? You just cannot appear here, horse or not. Have you figured it out? Give me a few more days of relaxation. There must be a wagon yard or freight yard in town. You can conceal me in the buckboard or buggy, if it is large enough, and park near the yard. I'll ease out, and, if questioned, claim I grabbed a ride on one of the carts. It is done all the time. They'll be out on the street in the morning, and if you stop by, you may employ me. I swear I can feed cattle, and even after Hank, it's an improvement. The sheriff decided to take a horse with him. When Thomas returned, he was bound over a saddle. When he spoke with Rachel, he suspected that her husband had been robbed and slain. The deputy had explored about and discovered my dead horse and saddle, concluding that whomever had rode him had done the killing. I overheard all of this and was relieved that neither the horse nor the saddle could be linked back to me. There was no mention of the Black Riders, so I assumed Vincent had arrived to the water hole after me. This was verified when Leonard White rode into the yard asking for the sheriff and said Thomas had stolen his cattle money. He promptly gave aid to Rachel, despite his amazement at seeing Thomas strapped over the saddle. It was the incorrect decision on his behalf. Rachel slammed into Vincent. "God damn it, Vincent. I would still have Thomas if you hadn't demanded that he move your cattle up the path beside ours. I do not want to see your buttocks around here at all. Just keep off my property." Rachel was now weeping. Vincent was still attempting to smooth things out, but it was completely ineffective. When Rachel tried to run him off with her firearm, the sheriff urged Vincent to go. The sheriff carried Thomas' corpse into town and delivered it to the undertaker. Rachel said that she will be in later to make the arrangements. It was becoming dark by the time they departed. Rachel entered the barn to feed the hens. She was still weeping gently. "Did you hear all of that? If the sheriff wasn't here, I was preparing to shoot that scumbag." Vincent had no idea how close he came to meeting his creator. "I understand, and I feel the same way. Tell me what he looks like. I want to know so that when I meet him, I don't mistake him for someone else." "He is tall, and I suppose the women think he is attractive. He wears fine clothing and grins excessively. He's been trying to sweet-talk me since Thomas departed with the herd. I didn't want anything to do with him back then, and I still don't. Rachel, let me get out of here. You're heading into town after nightfall. This will be an excellent opportunity to get me inside the wagon yard. I may be on the street, and you can employ me tomorrow, like we agreed. You are not well enough yet. Wait another 2 or 3 days. I cannot. If you employ me early in the morning, I may attend Thomas' funeral. I want to be there when they lay him down to rest. Can you refute that?" "Okay, you're correct." "No, I cannot. They'll feed you well and fix your dressings before we leave." While she was doing this, I informed her about my most recent job, which had gone so terribly. I said that I had been going by the name James Walker up north. I referred to myself as Jonathan Henderson. My mother's name was Wilkins, and Thomas and I shared it. Rachel asked me if I had any cash, and I responded, "Enough. I shouldn't need more than the $180 I carried. It would see me through until I got back here. Don't forget there's $600 in coin behind the steps in the hole you had me in. I also suppose you know about the insurance money that Thomas and I both carried too, don't you? You mean the $27 gold coin he carried in his boot?" "Yes, I know about it. It's dark now, and we better get going. You play it safe. I don't want to lose both of you." Rachel hugged me and apologized when I winced. Broken ribs were just not meant to be hugged. I debated whether or not to wear my gun, and I finally decided I had better. I wasn't the most popular person in some circles, and you never knew when you'd run into someone with a grudge. Christ, the pain almost killed me riding in the back of the buckboard. Give me a solid bronc to ride anytime. Rachel pulled into an alley beside the wagon yard, and I slid out. I sat down near a tarp-covered freight wagon. Rachel pulled out across the street and hitched her horse to the tie rail. I could see the building she entered from where I was sitting, and I was leaning up against a rack with a harness thrown over it. Rachel was standing in the door, which was held open by someone talking to her. After a few minutes, I felt around and found a comfortable seat near the entrance to the big barn, where I could hear several horses munching hay. I hesitated to go in the barn without asking, and the next thing I knew, there was a lantern shining in my face, held by a person standing behind the light, and I could see another person with him, as well as a star shining on his chest. "Get up, easy fella, and make it slow. Keep your hand away from your iron." I had fallen asleep and was most likely noticed by a swamper from the yard, who had gone and picked up the law. I rose as best I could. "What are you doing here? Where did you come from?" "I dropped off a wagon passing through. I got hurt a few days back, and am trying to get to my brother's spread. He's supposed to have a place close to here." "Who's your brother?" "Thomas Henderson." The deputy glanced at me and then made a decision. "Come on over to the jail. They'll find the sheriff and he'll speak with you." "Am I arrested?" "No, but the sheriff will want to talk to you. Come along." I hobbled after him out into the street and up to the jail. The deputy sent the swamper with the lantern to find the sheriff. When we arrived at the jail, the deputy offered me coffee and said his boss would be right along. I asked if the deputy knew where my brother lived, and he admitted he did. That was the only question he would answer until the sheriff arrived. The sheriff must have been in bed, since he was still tucking his shirt in when he walked through the door, and he immediately began asking questions. "Who are you, and what's your name?" "My name is Jonathan Henderson, and am looking for my brother." Can you tell me how I can get to his place? I was waiting until morning to ask around. Where are you from? Last place was a little valley up near Riverbend, north of here. I was signed on with some of the hill people, but I picked the wrong side. I got shot up some and was trying to get to the mass place to mend up. Well, fella, I'm afraid I've got bad news for you. Your brother got robbed and killed a few days ago. I just found him and brought him in this afternoon. The undertaker over at the furniture store is building his coffin right now, and your brother will be buried in the morning. His widow was in earlier and made the arrangements. God, this must be awful for you. Terrible for his widow, too. You know her, don't you? I knew he was married up. I never got to meet her yet. Her name's Rachel, I think. Thomas told me all about her when he first moved here. As far as him being an outlaw, I never had any paper on him come through my office. Better walk soft, Vincent. I sure as hell wouldn't want to do anything to rile him up if I were you. The sheriff paused for a bit before asking, what should we do now? I feel as if my heart has been torn out of me. I could not have gotten through the previous 2 or 3 days without you. Oh, Jonathan, I feel so alone and empty. Rachel sobbed, her eyes welling up. You mentioned you had a sister back in Tennessee. Can't she come out for a short while? Surely she could abandon her family till you recover from no mass death. I am the only family she has. She's a spinster who works at a bank. She said once that she may consider moving out here. However, it is a long travel, and I am not sure whether she will go. I'd love to have her come. What is her name? Is she younger or older than you? Her name is Emily Harper, and she's 2 years older. She hasn't married because she doesn't believe anybody would want her. She believes she's homely, and I suppose I couldn't call her lovely. I'm large, yet she's 4 inches taller than me. I've heard people refer to her as horsey. She always sits behind a glass in the bank, so people don't make fun of her appearance. She does, however, have a golden heart and is always willing to assist others. Maybe if she came out here, where there aren't as many women, she'd have a better chance of meeting a male. Look, we need to get that gold into your hands lawfully. Maybe not legally, but it's yours regardless of where it originated from. If we can find out how to get it to your sister, she can come here and claim she's giving your inheritance from your parents, an uncle or aunt, or whatever. It may go straight into the bank without any questions asked. Well, let's decide what to say to her. Okay, I'm going to run out of money shortly. It won't be long until whatever credit I had at the shop is canceled. People may feel sorry for me, but that won't last long if I can't repay them. How much money do you think there is in the saddlebag? I know Thomas was expecting to bring home $2,270 or a bit more. He agreed to be the trail boss for $260, but I doubt Leonard White will ever pay it. I will attempt to collect, however. At the very least, I can avoid embarrassing him. Rachel was the one who went into town to the post office, which was little more than putting a letter in a saddlebag and watching it go north on the stage. The mail that came in ended up in the general store, and the storekeeper held it for anyone who asked if there was anything for them. People who knew they would never get a letter made a ritual of asking anyway, always hoping, I guess. The town did have a telegraph for those who did business or needed to get my wounds healed quickly, but as I expected, I would always walk with a limp. It would be a couple of months before I attempted to bust any broncs or do any cattle roping. I could round up animals and move them somewhere, but that was about it. I saw a lot of Rachel, and I could see why Thomas had chosen her as his wife. I was half in love with her myself. Within a few days, I had never met a more pleasant or competent woman. Of course, I wasn't that familiar with women, good women that is. I decided that once I got Rachel settled with her money, I was going to leave. She'd make out all right even though she was carrying a child. Already, cowpokes were dropping around to see if they could help her. Vincent came once, where others were welcome, but she made it clear that he wasn't. 3 weeks and 2 days after Rachel had mailed the letter to her sister, a livery buggy pulled into the yard, and the driver handed Rachel a yellow telegraph slip. He whirled and left, and we waited until he was out of sight. Anxious, she opened it. There was a lot writing on the message scribbled on the sheet, and there was only one word, confirm. We'd see in a couple of weeks. Rachel was happy that night at supper because she was going to see her sister, whom she hadn't seen in years, and yes, if the plan worked out, she would have enough money to get by until another bunch of steers were ready to be sold, or someone she liked came along. The $2,270 would help in both cases. I wasn't considering myself in the mix, I said. Jonathan, what about us? Or more to the point, what about you? What do you mean? I saw you gazing at me. I can detect the signals just like any other lady. You would want to make love with me. Look, I know I can't provide a life for my kid without a guy. I need to find someone to take care of me. I can't declare I love you yet, but I will as more time passes. It's been nearly 3 months since Thomas left, and most of the time I can't recall his face. I'd prefer you to have the first opportunity. I know I can make you happy. I was taken aback. Here in front of me was a lady that any man would be happy to have by his side. I wanted her as well. But what? It simply didn't seem right, and that's why I was spending my evenings in the barn alone, despite the fact that she was just 50 feet away in her own bed. I eventually said something. Rachel, I'm not sure why, but I can't. When I get you comfortable and your sister arrives, they'll be going someplace, like I usually do. You just deserve more than me. A roaming cowhand who is too quick with his gun. That is why I use a different name to avoid endangering my family. I want the best for you, but I can't see how you'll find it with me. You're a foolish man, Jonathan, but I had to ask. You don't know how much I appreciate your being here with me. Are you sure about this? I need to locate someone. I am sure. Unless Leonard White enters the picture. If that was him and you married him, you'd be widowed before he could complete his vows. I despise him just as much as you do. It will never be him. I have a sense there could be someone. Do you want to tell me about it? There is an Englishman, Nathaniel Everett. He's a remittance man who owns that farm over east of my spread. He is some older than me, but always respectful and asks if he can do anything to help. He knows I go into town on Saturday mornings, and he has invited me for coffee in the hotel dining room for the last 4 weeks. I haven't encouraged him, but I haven't discouraged him either. I will most likely see him tomorrow morning, and if you're sure about yourself, I might invite you. You think that much of me to give me first chance? Jonathan, you're a wonderful person. No, it's you. You remind me a lot of Thomas sometimes. I was worried if we made a pair that I would think I was back with Thomas, and that wouldn't be fair to you or to his memory either. Jonathan, why don't you find a woman and marry her? They'll sell you this place. It's big enough to make a living on. There is still the money from Leonard White. That's yours as far as I'm concerned. I don't think anybody would have me for the same reason I gave you. Of course, I could wait around and marry your sister. I chuckled as I said this, and Rachel gave me an odd look but said nothing. It was foggy when I went on my bed in the barn. I lay there, wondering if I had made a mistake by turning Rachel down. I came to the conclusion that I did love her, but that I hadn't made a mistake. I turned over to go to sleep. Then it occurred to me, the night was perfect. It was probably going to rain. I would retrieve the saddlebags and bring them in from the top of the rock pile. I was going to need them shortly, and God forbid someone saw me getting them. I made myself a chore. I missed the rocks completely the first pass, but the fog lifted, and even though it was dark, I got my bearings. It was a wonder I didn't kill myself climbing up that pile of rocks in the dark. I was about to give up looking for them when I slipped, and my hand went down into a crevice, and there they were. There had to be between 20 and 25 pounds of gold coins in the side pockets. It was dead weight carrying it back to the barn. I was out of breath when I got there, and it was pouring rain, which pleased me because all tracks would be washed out. Rachel might as well count it with me, so I went close to the side of the ranch house, where I knew her bed was, and spoke through the cabin's wall. Rachel, let me in. Don't show a light, though, until I come in. I stumbled through the door and dropped my burden, which made a loud clunk when it hit the floor. Rachel lit a lamp and checked the 3 windows the cabin had. She and I figured we had as much right to this gold as anyone else, but all that had happened made both of us uneasy. I knew now how a guilty man felt. I took off my slicker, Rachel advised I take off my wet boots, and I dumped the saddlebags onto the kitchen table. One saddle pocket carried 11 rolls of cash and a sack of additional coins, while the other pocket only had 2 rolls. We sat down and looked at the money, which was more than either of us had ever seen before. Rachel, there's another $600 out in the barn that I took out of one of the pockets. It most likely came out of the one with the 2 rolls. I think that must be the mass money, too, for the cattle he sold. The other has to be Vincent's. Christ, Vincent must be crazy over the loss of all this good. He lost his money when he had Thomas killed, thanks to you. And he isn't getting me either, thanks again to you. I owe you so much. Are you sure about the decision you made earlier? Yes. I looked at the rolls of coins and was pleased to see that they had all been circulated, so they couldn't be recognized or traced. We debated whether to break the rolls apart and put them in a sack, but I said I thought they would travel better the way they were. After that, Rachel looked at me. Jonathan, would you stay while I make coffee? They'll put your boots near the fire so they can dry a little more. They're so wet now you'd never get them on. While we waited for the coffee to boil, I questioned Rachel about her upbringing and how she met Thomas, as well as about her sister. I met Thomas through Clara. He came into her bank and flirted with her. I told you she isn't what anyone would call pretty. I'm not either, but I can pass so people won't notice how homely I am. I think Clara fell for him in just a few minutes. He was in the bank later, and we both were walking down the street when we met Thomas. After that, he had eyes only for me. Clara was crushed, which I wasn't aware of until after Thomas had asked me to be his wife. I love my sister, and fortunately, she has never held my taking Thomas against me, but she needs to modify her attitude. If you ever saw a 6-foot shrinking violet, that's my sister. Coffee was brewed and served. You know, I was intending to seduce you into my bed tonight. I've been without a man for 4 months, and it is wearing on me. Then you made the comment you might wait around and marry my sister. I couldn't do that to her again. Take her man, I mean. Now drink your coffee and get back to the barn before I change my mind. She disappeared behind the lean-to, where her bed was, and I stomped into my boots, leaving my half-drunk coffee on the table. Rachel made canvas sacks for the rolls and sewed them inside a blanket roll, balanced so they would ride the horse's rump and not shift or fall off. The bag of loose coins I put out in the barn, along with the other sack containing the $600, was quite a stash, but Rachel deserved every penny. Rachel had explained in her letter that she would be leaving in 3 days for a rendezvous with Clara, who was coming in by stagecoach to an agreed-upon location. The telegraph message that had arrived said exactly what it meant, confirmed the date, time, and place. Rachel made herself as attractive as possible and headed for town, hoping that the Englishman would meet her and invite her to Sunday dinner. She was successful because when she returned to the yard later that day, she was nearly thrilled. "Jonathan, would you kill and dress out a chicken? I'm having a guest for dinner tomorrow." "Great. That's good news." "He really is interested then?" "Yes, he is. A little worried about you, though. He knows you're James Walker and is afraid you might be overprotective of your dead brother's widow. Would you have dinner with us and put his mind at rest on that point?" "I could, Rachel. I have hesitated to ask, but could I have some of those mess clothes? Mine are just about worn out." "Oh my God, what was I thinking of?" "Of course, everything is yours. I just kept them around to remind me of him. It's time to let him go. Take them." Rachel approached me in tears just before her visitor arrived, saying, "I don't have a decent dress to wear. My tummy sticks out too much for me to put on my good dress." I was so counting on him to see me looking nice. "He knows you're pregnant, doesn't he?" "Of course, that is what has made him so solicitous of me. Put on your best dress and put an apron over your belly." "What's the problem?" Rachel hugged me for the second time, and I realized I needed to find a girlfriend fast. Nathaniel Everett arrived at the yard at the allotted hour, and I was there to harness his horse. The surrey he was driving was a gorgeous piece of equipment, with red wheels and a shining black lacquer finish. The horse wasn't the normal driving horse, either. It was too finely boned. He stepped down, and I introduced myself. "My name is Jonathan Henderson, and am happy to meet you. When I'm not at home, I go by the name James Walker." I had done my best to clean up and was dressed in some of Thomas' clothing to avoid looking too rough. I thought my name would suffice. "My name is Nathaniel Everett. I'm pleased to meet you too. I understand that you've been protecting your sister-in-law against nefarious individuals. I hope you never put me in that category. I got the protecting and the sister-in-law part, but the rest went over my head. It's great when families stand together." Julian reached back into the surrey and pulled out the prettiest bunch of flowers I'd ever seen, as well as a bottle with a little dust still on it. ID never drank much of the stuff, but I knew what a bottle of wine looked like, and ID heard that the older the bottle, the better. This must be good because it looked old enough. Rachel held the door open, and Julian presented the flowers. I don't think this has ever happened to Rachel before. Flowers, I mean. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she took them, smelled them, and kissed Julian on the cheek, saying how lovely they were. However, she was flustered when he handed her the wine. "I'm sorry, I don't have any glasses to serve this in. Would it be all right to wait until some other time to drink the wine?" "Certainly, madam. I'm sure we'll have a chance to enjoy it later." The chicken was cooked to perfection, and Rachel had harvested some potatoes and carrots from her garden out back. For dessert, Rachel had purchased dried peaches from the shop and created a pie, which was fantastic. By this point, we'd gotten to know each other by first names, and Julian seemed particularly thrilled when the pie arrived. "Rachel, You do me the greatest honor by serving this pie. These peaches are from my own orchard. If you purchased them in town, when I came here 5 years ago, I decided I wouldn't be without my favorite fruit. I have 3 dozen trees that have reached maturity, and I am ready to pick and start drying. I will harvest several hundred pounds from many, many bushels of peaches this year. This makes my day. Rachel cleaned the table, and we began to get acquainted. Jonathan, I'm thinking you're Rachel's closest relative. I would like permission to call on her quarter. If you will, first let me tell you a little about myself. I am the third son of the Earl of Kinf. I'm what some call a remittance man. In other words, I receive a remittance to stay away from England and never contest the title. There is little chance I would ever inherit, for there are my 2 brothers before me. In bygone days, heirs fought each other for the title, even to the killing of each other. Then it was found to be easier to banish the least likely to inherit out of the country and pay a remittance to keep this from happening. Being here is by my choice, not because I have to. I do receive a stipend from my father's sister, so I suppose I am that, a remittance man. If it did come to me, I would turn the title down, for I love it here on the half section I have settled on. My property is unique in that it can be 100% developed. It is well watered with rich soil and situated up against the butte, sheltered from the weather. I thought for a long time that I would be content to do this all alone, but I find that I need someone to talk to and share my vision. Also, there will be no sons to pass my efforts on to if I don't marry. I have admired Mrs. Henderson ever since her husband left with the cattle drive. She has managed this ranch with competence and fortitude. The death of her husband has made her that much stronger. The light hasn't gone out of her eyes. She has put her loss behind her, and now what about the baby she is carrying? Many men I know wouldn't want to be a father to a baby conceived by someone else. To me, that wouldn't be a problem. If we marry and the child is a boy, he will have all the rights of a firstborn as if he were conceived by me. If it is a girl, I'm sure she will be an image of her mother, and he'll love her as much as I will come to love Mrs. Henderson, if given the chance. I am not looking for just someone to keep my house or go to be Julian had a way with words, and I was impressed with his sincerity. He wasn't trying to sell himself. He stated what he hoped for, and it was enough to allow him the chance to court and marry this widow. Not only that, but he looked me right in the eye as he said these things, and I believed him. I looked at Rachel, who was looking at me with a pleading expression. I wore a tie. Mr. Donovan, I need to go down to the South 40 to see about some stock. I may be gone for quite a while. You may not be here when I get back, but I hope to run into you frequently when you come to visit. When I returned, Nathaniel Everett had already departed, and Rachel was anxious. Jonathan, do you think I'm good enough for him? Can I live up to his expectations? Oh, he is so nice. I wouldn't disappoint him for the world. Rachel, he has chosen you, not you him. He'll be around a few more times before he asks you to marry him. Tell him your concerns, but don't sell yourself short. Be yourself. That is what people love about you. You are open and honest. Don't worry. He wouldn't be talking like he did today if he wasn't serious. Oh, I hope so. I know I can make him happy if I get the chance. You didn't mind what he said about giving the baby his name and fathering it as if it were his own, did you? It being conceived by your brother, I mean. No, and that would be what Thomas would want, I'm sure. I was happy for Rachel, but also a little sad for myself. I had a close call in my last shootout, and I might not survive the next one. I left and headed north before daylight Tuesday morning, promising to return by Thursday evening, and I was supposed to meet Clara as planned. You couldn't tell by looking at me and my horse that I was carrying $13,000 in gold coins. That 20 pounds of dead weight was really demanding on a horse, so I led along rather lightly. I was going cross-country and hoped I didn't run across too many riders along the route. On Wednesday morning, I drove into town, put the horse in the livery, and asked which hotel was best. I got myself a room at the hotel and went out and sat on the veranda. At noon, the stage pulled in front of the hotel and unloaded its passengers. She was there. You couldn't miss her 6 feet tall, or maybe more if she stood straight. Her hair was pulled back into a bun. Her nose was overly large, and it occurred to me, Christ, in looking her over the way I would a horse. If she was one, I'd want to be looking at her teeth. Clara waited there with her travel trunk at her feet, and no one approached her. I walked off the porch, down the stairs, and put the trunk over my shoulder. Let on, ma'am. I assume you're staying here tonight, and going on tomorrow? Headed for the fair town of Lynbrook, maybe? Go right in the door and get yourself a room. They'll carry your trunk for you. Thank you, mister. Just call me Jonathan, ma'am. Names don't mean much out here in the West. I saw a look of relief, and I did see her teeth because she gave me a little smile. I followed her to the desk, and with luck, she had the room across from mine. I watched the hall, and when there was no one that could see me, I ducked into her room with my blanket roll. We hurriedly stripped the coins out of the rolls and dumped them into the empty bank bags with the logo of the bank where she used to work, these that she had brought with her. We felt it was important to our Clara went down to the desk and asked if someone could deliver a note to the Union Central Bank. We lifted the trunk's false bottom and placed the filled bags inside, then put her clothes back on top. I cautiously returned across the hall and stood with my door cracked to ensure no one entered her room. 20 minutes later, a gentleman came down the aisle and knocked on Clara's door. He had a good-sized satchel in one hand and a small portable writing desk in the other. An hour later, he came out and went down the hall, carrying the satchel, which appeared to be heavy. After he was gone, I knocked on Clara's door. Clara smiled warmly. The bank business is all tidied up, and the accounts are exactly how Rachel wanted them. Working in a bank as I have been, I knew just what was needed to get things completed in such a short time. Then she began writing, asking me about Rachel and how she was doing. Clara, she is fine. She is getting over my brother's death pretty well. Clara's eyes welled up with tears as I said this. I'm so sorry. You must feel as bad as Rachel does. That was so thoughtless of me. Don't bother yourself now. I'm more interested in you. What are your plans? Are you going to stay out west here? I guess so. I sold everything back in Tennessee. Rachel thinks I might even. What's the word? Oh, I remember, corral a man. I think it's hopeless though. Every man looks at me and then runs the other way. Feeling sorry for yourself? Wouldn't you if you looked like I do? Well, if you don't like how you look, change it. Yeah, how? Listen to me. I want mean to, but I might say something to you that may hurt. Get beyond that first. Think back to when you worked in your bank. I bet there was some woman that came in that wasn't pretty or beautiful, but everyone enjoyed being around her. Why? It was the way she acted, not how she looked. Now about you. Rachel said you were a huge, shrinking violet, but she meant it in a loving way. I can see what she meant. You got off the stage and stood there looking another thing. Get rid of that bun. You appear like you have magnificent hair. If you don't like it long, trim it and bring it forward to the sides of your face. This will hide some of your facial traits. You mean my big nose, don't you? Yes, but you mentioned it, not me. Another thing, stand up straight. Stand proud and smile like you own the world. Be confident, even if you don't feel that way. Also, you are wearing so many clothes I can't tell what you look like. Your shape may be terrible or out of this world. Either way, someone out there is going to think you're just what he wants. He at least will need a hint, and he won't know until you give him one. I saw your dresses in the trunk. There isn't a bright one in the whole bunch. When you get to where you can have some dresses made, ask the dressmaker what would look good on you. Rachel has some money now. Ask her for some if you don't have any of your own. She loves you and can't wait to see you. She does want someone for you. Women are scarce out here. This is the place you can find a mate. Maybe even love. What happens if I do all those things and still nobody wants to be around me? They'll tell you what you do. Half of what I said, and he'll squire you to the first dance that is held after you get to Lynbrook. That will get you out and into circulation. You will be dancing continually. If someone asks me if he can take you home, it's because he wants to kiss you. Do I have to go with him if he asks? What if I want you to take me home? I definitely would. The second dance would be up to you. Remember, I may be looking for someone as well as you. Clara blushed when I mentioned this, and we chatted briefly about Rachel's troubles. I informed her that Rachel already had a guy interested in her. Clara kicked herself with rage. You see what I mean? My sister is always able to get a man to love her, even when she is pregnant with someone else's child. It makes me so mad, and it is so unfair. Clara, I turned your sister down, and it wasn't because of the baby either. She's just better than me. I had the feeling that I was going to meet someone someday that didn't care that I had to kill a couple of men while doing my job. I killed the men that shot my brother, and someday am going to kill the one that ordered his death. You think you were lonely? I'd like to change. But how can I? No one would want me after they found out I've killed 4 men. I went back across the hall, leaving Clara to look after me. Clara was leaving on the stage the next morning, and I was going to shag cross-country by horseback. When she got to Lynbrook, Clara was going to leave a bank draft from Wells Fargo with the general store owner, who did the town's banking. I'm sure he would be glad to see Rachel's bank draft, as he had been carrying her credit, and it had to be near the limit. Clara promised to get the live after supper. I lay down to sleep, but after an hour, I gave up and checked out of the hotel. My horse had 7 or more hours of rest and should be back up to peak, but I was ready to go. I loped out of town, kicked that horse in the ribs, and started to make time. I found the trail I had come up on and retraced it. I rested my bronc for 10 minutes or so every hour, and by mid-morning, I was halfway down the butte and still a mile from the ranch when I noticed dust in the valley, 2 miles from the house. That dust was in a direct line with the Black Oak Ranch, so I hurried my horse and slid into the yard, shouting for Rachel. There was no answer, so I ran into the house, where there was a chair tipped over and a broken cup on the floor. In the corner, there was a dishcloth with some blood on it, thrown in the corner of the sink. I ran out and grabbed my rope, heading for the corral, where Rachel's buggy was beside the barn. Before I got there, I read the tracks of another wagon in the yard, where there were some scuffle marks. I got one good print of Rachel's boot and several of one with spurs. I dragged the best horse back to where my mount stood, heaving with exhaustion. I almost mounted up right away, but then I thought I might need a rifle. Thomas had a Winchester and an old Springfield .45. If I was going to get into a close-up gun battle, I needed the Winchester, with its magazine full of shells. I opted for the single-shot .50. If it shot as I was just getting that pony up to speed when I met Nathaniel Everett on his way to see Rachel. I stopped long enough to tell him what I suspected and why, and he turned and followed me off the road and down into the valley. Julian, with his thoroughbred, kept pace with me, and we just trailed along at a good clip. The wagon, which I assumed was a buckboard, never deviated from its direction, so maybe this wasn't Vincent at all. I pulled up and turned to Julian. He'll be stopping soon to rest his horses. I think we should swing wide around him and come in from the sides. This may be where he plans to cause Rachel some mischief, so well, hurry right along. Be prepared for some sort of ambush if he spotted us already. Julian went left, and I went right, and I was the one caught in the ambush, not Julian. I was easing around a thorn thicket when Vincent spoke from my right side. I guess this is as far as you go, Charlie. This is my day. I get the woman I've always wanted, and I get to kill James Walker. You might as well come up to the fire about 50 feet ahead. Get going. Keep your hands high, away from your gun, or he'll drop you right here. I hadn't seen him, and I hadn't seen the fire before he caught me. Rachel was sitting near the fire with her hands and feet bound. The fire he had built was small, so I wasn't surprised I had missed it. I had been caught. And I was disappointed in how it happened. I just wasn't as sharp as I used to be. They'll just have to give up my way of life and settle down, I said aloud. Rachel stared at me in fear as I entered camp with Vincent's gun shielding me. Oh, Jonathan, I'm so sorry. I was counting on you to find me. You must have gotten home early to be here so soon. I determined that I could distract Vincent. Rachel, don't worry. Help is on the way. I left Clara a note at the ranch. I met her, and she was able to transfer Vincent's money into your bank account with no trouble at all. You know, I think I want to marry your sister when we get home. That way, we all will be living right close together. You and Julian, and me and Clara. Vincent began to say I was bluffing when Julian said, "He'll do it." It got busy right then. Vincent whirled towards the voice. I threw myself sideways, pulling my gun, and then there was gunfire. All three of us got off shots. One bullet went forever gone, but only God knew where the other two went, into Vincent, who was now lying on the ground. I approached him and kneeled beside him while he was waving goodbye. Just so you know, Vincent, I killed your 2 men after they shot Thomas. I spent an hour with him before he cashed out. I took the money, and Rachel has it safe in the bank now, and it is free and clear. Your death was coming the minute you sent those two after Thomas. I could see I could stop talking because Vincent wasn't listening. Julian had untied Rachel, and she was clinging to him. We spent the night in the rough country. In the morning, we loaded Vincent into the buckboard. Julian tied his horse to the back. And I headed out for town and the sheriff, while they followed me on the trail slowly. I didn't think much about Rachel, Julian, or that body I had helped take the life out of. I had done that before in other places, and I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. I wanted to look ahead into Clara, who I knew was coming into town today. God, what a woman to make up with. I hoped she'd have me. I'd have to work fast, though, because she was a powerful woman, and others would see what I saw. Eventually, she'd be someone to work alongside of. I walked toward the sheriff's office. He wasn't there. Sheriff, you want to get on your horse? Nathaniel Everett and Rachel Henderson are bringing in Leonard White and a buckboard. He's got 2 bullets in him, one of them mine, and he's dead. They'll give you the details. I need a drink. They'll be in the saloon if you want to ask me any more questions later. Clara stepped down from the stage and into my arms, which surprised me greatly because no one had ever come off a stage and hugged me before. I couldn't have planned it any better. Everyone in town went down to pay their respects to the deceased Leonard White. There's more, Jonathan. If you don't mind, I don't want to wait until you take me to a dance so I can kiss you. I checked to see if she was serious, and she was. A few minutes later, I heard Rachel behind me. That was an invitation if I ever heard one. Clara, what are you doing? You can't stand in the middle of the street and kiss someone. What will people think? I don't know, sis. But is it any worse than having two men fighting over you, and one of them ending up dead from the hole underneath the barn? I took one of those $20 gold pieces and handed it to the new preacher in town for executing a double wedding. Rachel and Julian went away on a vacation to St. Louis, while Clara and I simply wanted to become acquainted. Really acquainted, if you catch my meaning. By the time Charlotte Donovan into the world, Clara had announced that we should also be considering names. Life was excellent. Rachel had pulled a fast one on me, directing Clara to deposit those 13 rolls of coins. Okay, but she split them. The 11 that belonged to Leonard White went into an account for Jonathan Henderson. That was either me or my brother, but he was dead, and Rachel claimed it wasn't hers. Sometime later, I laughingly said to Clara, "You married me for my money because you were the one who arranged the deposit." My blanket roll was thrown at me as I ran, and when mealtime came around, it was bread and milk. My fifth meal of this, and a million apologies later, she slapped an account book down on the table hard enough to bounce my bowl upside down. This woman I married was no shrinking violet anymore. "Look at that," she demanded. I sold the family homestead back in Tennessee, and it was mine to sell. I could have gotten by just fine. I didn't need you, and look at this. She slapped the deed down on the table beside the account book. That's 200 acres of timber over north of here. When the railroad comes this way, that iron's going to be laying on my trees. That timber is almost priceless to the railroad now, and worth more as long as there are trains. I don't want to. I glanced at her with an open jaw. And look at this, she threw our marriage certificate on the table. I know money and value, and you ain't money. Come to bed and show me how valuable you are. There is a time to speak and a time to do. I had finished talking. Nathaniel Everett was the one who talked about vision, and he had his share, more than his share, really. He was always looking to the future. I ran beef cattle, and with his help, I did mighty well. He showed me how to upgrade my stock, and when the stockyards started buying beef by the pound instead of by the head, I was getting a premium price. The other ranchers were just getting by. In the bad years, I had haystacks to feed. Julian also had cows, but he had milk cows. He brought a big black and white breed from England called Frisian and a smaller breed from some island called Guernsey. The Frisian udders held quantity, and the Guernsey had quality, and together, the milk made a wonderful cheese. He also had orchards, peaches and plums. He tried apples, but they didn't do well until something called York came along. God, they were good. He filled one railroad car with pecans and sent to the Donovans. Started their family with Charlotte, who was more Henderson than Donovan. But people forgot that after a while, except me. She was my favorite, even over my own two boys. Clara and I started with a boy, then another, then a girl, and when we had another boy, we said we had enough. Over time, the kids of both families decided that they didn't like me being referred to as Jonathan, so I took up the name of Charlie again. We all had a happy existence, and there were always kids sitting up to the table, and there were often as many Donovans as Hendersons at ours and vice versa. We went to England for a month when Charlotte was 19 years old. Julian wanted us to see his childhood home, where he grew up, and for his family to meet their English cousins. The Earl's manor house was a huge pile of brick and stone with additions of wood, and it was as gloomy inside as it was ugly outside. The only thing beautiful about the buildings were the grounds surrounding them. Charlotte caused quite a stir when she was telling her cousins about how her father and Uncle Charlie had rescued her mother from the bad man Leonard White. All the kids knew the story and had made a little skit out of the episode, which they played out as well as they could with positions and sound effects. Then they started bragging about me being a bad man and how I had killed the men who had killed my brother, as well as 2 other men in gun battles. "Uncle Charlie, bring your gun and a box of shells, please." She told to the cousins that I never went any place without my pistol. "Addie, if you want showing off, you're going to have to do it yourself." "Thanks, Uncle Charlie. They'll show these stuffy men and prissy women something." She went up to her quarters and came down where she had put on a Stetson with a chin strap and her riding boots. I had taught the girl, and I knew what was coming. Julian was smiling, and Rachel was just shaking her head at her daughter. Our audience was giggling and horsing around with one another while we waited for the show. Charlotte had a full figure that wouldn't quit, and she knew it. Those high-heeled cow boots did things for her tight jean-clad legs and what was above them. By this time, there were 40-some-odd people, kid and adult, waiting, never knowing what was going to happen. Addie came out, putting the cartridge belt and holster around her hips. She leaned down, facing the crowd, and tied the holster down. I thought an old guy's eyes were going to pop out of his head. Addie was going on. My oldest had set up a target far down the lawn, surrounded by some raised flower beds, so there was no danger. Addie never gave any warning, and she had that gun in her hand and was firing from the hip. God, what a racket! We were close to the building, and the sound from that .45 was bouncing off the walls. I guess these people didn't know Minnie, my youngest, raced down and moved the target. Everyone was interested to see whether Addie had hit it. There were 5 holes in the paper. The Earl's oldest son, a pretentious little twit, remarked, "You missed one. That's what they call a 6-shooter, isn't it?" Addie responded, "Where we come from, it isn't always wise to fire your gun empty in case the man you just killed has a sidekick. I guess it's safe enough here." She fired the last shell while standing sideways to the target and firing across her body. It wasn't dead center, but it did clip the edge. Addie demonstrated her proficiency with her left hand by performing a border shift, firing first with one hand, then shifting the gun to the other and popping the last 2 with the other hand. "She got filthy," she said. "If you have more than one gun firing at you, you want to make as small a target as you can of yourself." Jake, my oldest, yelled, "Addie up." Addie whirled and looked up to see the airtight can that Jake had heaved into the air. She hit it twice before it bounced on the ground, and she hit it twice more, bouncing. I don't know what those Brits thought of their American cousins, but we were something to brag about. I guess that visit was the last time we were all together as a family. Charlotte caught the attention of one of the guests at the Earls that day, and she caught his as well. She decided to stay in England when we returned to the States, and she honeymooned with her husband a few months later. Before leaving, I gave her my gun, which had killed the guys who had slain her biological father, and which I had always had with me. Little did I know that she would use it in Canada to save her husband from a thief in the gold camps. My oldest daughter and Rachel's youngest son were visiting Charlotte in England when her husband was home with his parents. We received a cable informing us that they had booked passage home on a wondrous new passenger ship named the Olympic, which prompted us to establish a cemetery for our 2 families. We erected a monument to the children and hoped they would be near each other in their final moments. Thank you for watching. Do you think Jonathan made the correct decision? Share your ideas in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe for more. See you next time.